The heartbreak that made Keanu Reeves Hollywood's quiet hero, the night was silent. Yet Keanu Reeves sat alone, staring at the city lights through his apartment window. People often saw him as the man of action on screen, the hero who never backed. Down, but behind the curtain of fame, there was a different story, a quieter truth, one filled with heartbreak and scars that never fully healed. His silence was not emptiness, it was the weight of the past pressing against his heart. Keanu had once believed life would be kind to him. In his early days, when the world opened doors to his career, he felt hope. He carried dreams not only for himself, but for the woman he loved, Jennifer Syme. Their love was gentle, steady, and simple. They laughed in small kitchens, walked through streets at night holding hands, and planned a future together that was never about Hollywood, but about peace and family. It was during those quiet moments, away from cameras and lights, that Keanu thought he had found his true home. Then came the tragedy that would change him forever. Their baby, whom they had been waiting for with pure excitement, was born still. The silence in that hospital room was louder than any sound he had ever heard. It was the kind of silence that breaks a man in ways words cannot describe. Keanu held Jennifer's hand as she cried, and he tried to be strong, but inside he felt his heart collapse. A dream had died before it had even begun, and from that moment, nothing would ever be the same. The pain did not stop there. Only a year later, Jennifer herself was gone, taken by a sudden car accident. It was as if life had tested Keanu's resilience in the cruelest way possible. He walked behind her casket with no words, no anger, just a deep sadness that left him unable to understand why the people he loved most were taken so quickly. He did not scream, he did not lash out, but those who knew him saw the heaviness in his eyes. Hollywood expected him to shine, yet inside, he carried storms. Most actors would have turned away from the world, buried themselves in fame, or drowned their pain in distractions. But Keanu chose a different path. He did not chase the spotlight. Instead, he walked through life with humility, with quiet respect for every soul he met. People would later notice how he gave up his seat on the subway, how he spoke to strangers, with kindness how he donated silently to hospitals, never asking for recognition. What few understood was that every small act of kindness was his way of giving back, of honoring the love he lost. Even in Hollywood, where egos rise higher than buildings, Keanu was different. He was never late on set. He treated the crew with more respect than some stars gave their directors, and he listened when people spoke, truly listened, as if their words mattered more than his own. In every smile he gave, there was a shadow of sorrow, but there was also strength, resilience born from heartbreak. The pain of his past could have destroyed him, but instead, it shaped him into a quiet hero. His story was not about fame, not about fortune, but about endurance, about carrying grief with grace and turning suffering into compassion. And yet, even as he lived with kindness, the world did not know the full depth of his journey, because behind every gentle smile there was still a man who walked alone through the night, remembering the life he almost had, the love that still whispered in his heart. Keanu Reeves was not just Hollywood's star. He was its silent survivor, and this was only the beginning of his story. The quiet road of resilience. After the loss of Jennifer, the world expected Keanu Reeves to collapse. Many whispered that he might disappear from Hollywood, that he would give up acting, that his grief was too heavy to carry under the weight of cameras and fame. But instead of running away, he chose to walk forward, slowly, one step at a time, with the quiet strength of a man who had already faced the worst life could give. He returned to film sets not with the arrogance of a star, but with the humility of someone who understood pain. Every crew member noticed it. While other actors stayed in private trailers, Keanu would sit with the lighting team, the stunt workers, or the camera assistants. He asked about their lives, listened carefully, and remembered details the next day. When a worker once told him that his wife was sick, Keanu quietly arranged for her medical bills to be paid. He did not announce it. He did not allow cameras to capture it. He just walked away with his head down, as if kindness was not a choice, but simply his duty. Behind the scenes, though, the emptiness followed him. Late at night, after the set was quiet, Keanu would sit alone in his hotel room or on a balcony, staring into the distance. The laughter and applause from the world felt far away, almost meaningless. He missed the sound of Jennifer's voice, the smile they shared when they imagined a family. The silence of his personal life clashed with the noise of Hollywood, and it tore him in two. But instead of letting grief destroy him, he let it guide him. There were moments when he found himself walking the streets alone, unrecognized in simple clothes, his head slightly bowed. Strangers passed him, never realizing that the man they brushed shoulders with had carried such heartbreak. Yet those who did recognize him would often find him warm, approachable, never rushing, never proud. He would stop for photos, greet them with genuine smiles, and sometimes even stay for conversations longer than expected. To many, he was a star. But to Keanu, he was just another human being trying to heal. His films during this period reflected the fire inside him. When he acted, he did not just perform. He brought real emotion to the screen, emotions carved from his own wounds. Audiences around the world felt something different in his characters, an honesty that few actors could deliver. When he fought on screen, people saw not just a hero, but a man battling unseen wars within. When he looked into the camera with sorrow, people felt it was not acting, but truth. Despite his fame, Keanu never surrounded himself with the glitter of Hollywood parties or endless celebrations. He lived modestly, rode the subway, and often ate alone in quiet cafes. Sometimes he shared his table with homeless people, not for attention, but because he could not bear to see another soul abandoned by the world. His humility confused those who only measured success with wealth and status. But Keanu knew the truth. All the money, all the fame, could never bring back what he lost. So he chose instead to use it to help others. Friends noticed that he rarely spoke of his pain. Instead, he poured his heart into small acts of goodness. When his co-stars received expensive gifts from studios, Keanu chose to give his own earnings to the stunt team and backstage crew, the people who rarely got recognition. Once, he gave motorcycles to the entire stunt crew of a film, simply saying, "You guys deserve it." It was not about the gift. It was about gratitude, about showing that their efforts mattered. And yet, no matter how much kindness he spread, the nights were still heavy. Grief is not something that fades. It is something that shapes. Keanu carried it quietly, never asking for pity, never showing anger, but always remembering. Those memories became his strength, teaching him resilience. They whispered to him that life could be cruel, but kindness could still survive. The world began to see him differently. He was no longer just the star of action films, no longer just the man with sharp stunts and serious eyes. He was becoming a symbol of something deeper, a reminder that even in a world of loss, respect, humility, and resilience could create a quiet kind of hero. But destiny was not finished with Keanu Reeves. Just when it seemed like he had found a fragile balance, new challenges and unexpected twists awaited him, moments that would once again test the strength of his spirit. The man who carried silence, Keanu Reeves, often found himself caught between two worlds. On one side was the glamorous image of Hollywood, where lights flashed, premieres sparkled, and crowds shouted his name. On the other side was the quiet shadow of his personal life, where grief lingered and silence was his closest companion. It was a strange balance, a life where people saw him as a hero on screen, but rarely understood the storms hidden behind his calm eyes. After the tragedies that shaped him, Keanu became even more private. He rarely gave interviews, and when he did, his answers were short, almost hesitant, as if too many words might open wounds he had worked so hard to close. Journalists tried to dig into his sorrow, but Keanu refused to turn his pain into a spectacle. Instead, he spoke softly about life, about how precious it was, about how love mattered more than fame. Those who listened closely could hear the weight behind his words, the lessons learned through suffering. One night, after finishing a long day on set, Keanu walked through the city streets instead of taking a car. He liked the feeling of being unseen, of blending into the crowd. A group of young fans recognized him and rushed to his side, their faces glowing with excitement. Instead of brushing them off, Keanu stopped, smiled gently, and asked about their lives. One girl admitted she had been struggling with loneliness, and without hesitation, Keanu hugged her. There were no cameras, no journalists, only a quiet moment where a star became just a kind stranger offering comfort. His silence spoke louder than words. People around him began to notice that he carried himself differently from most celebrities. He did not demand attention, he did not seek applause, yet his presence left an impact everywhere he went. A waiter once said that Keanu left a large tip and whispered, "Take care of yourself," before walking away. A homeless man once shared that Keanu sat with him, shared food, and listened without judgment. These small acts spread through whispers, and soon the world began to see him as more than an actor. He became a symbol of kindness, but inside, the pain was still alive. Every birthday reminded him of the child he never got to hold. Every quiet evening reminded him of the woman he lost too soon. Yet instead of drowning in sorrow, Keanu used that pain as fuel. He poured it into his work, into his relationships with others, into his deep respect for life. He knew suffering could harden a man, but he chose to let it soften him instead. Then came an unexpected twist in his career. While many believed his time in the spotlight was fading, a new role emerged, one that would define a new chapter of his life. He was offered the part of John Wick, a character built on loss, resilience, and vengeance. Some thought it was just another action film, but for Keanu, it was personal. The grief of John Wick mirrored his own, the silent heartbreak, the resilience to keep moving forward. When audiences watched the film, they felt something raw, something real. They were not just seeing an actor perform, they were watching a man bleed truth into fiction. The success of the film shocked the industry. People suddenly remembered the power of Keanu Reeves, not as a fading star, but as a man who carried authenticity into every role. But what they did not realize was that his performance was not just about acting. It was about survival, about turning private heartbreak into public inspiration. Yet fame still did not change him. While the movie brought millions, Keanu still rode the subway, still ate quietly at diners, still lived far from the chaos of luxury. When asked why, he simply said, "I have enough." It was not an answer of arrogance, but of peace. He knew money could never replace love, but it could ease the pain of others, and that was enough for him. Through every act, every word, and every role, Keanu Reeves showed the world that true strength is not found in pride, but in humility, not in hiding pain, but in living with it openly and kindly. He had become Hollywood's quiet hero, but his journey was far from finished. New challenges, deeper losses, and greater tests of character still waited for him in the chapters ahead. Storms and shadows, as the world celebrated Keanu Reeves for his return to the spotlight through the John Wick films. Very few understood that behind the applause, he still walked through storms. The cameras showed a man in control, a professional who never failed his crew, an actor who carried films with honesty. But when the lights faded and the crowds disappeared, he often sat alone, his thoughts drifting back to the people he had lost. Fame gave him noise, but his heart still lived in silence. Keanu never pretended that success erased his pain. He knew grief did not vanish with time. It only learned to live inside you, reshaping your soul. Friends who saw him privately said he was gentle, soft-spoken, sometimes distant, as if part of him still lived in another world. Yet, despite carrying that heaviness, he showed resilience that inspired those around him. It was not the loud resilience of someone shouting victory, but the quiet strength of someone who kept standing even when the ground beneath him had cracked. There were days when he questioned everything. He wondered why life took away the people he loved most, why destiny seemed to test him again and again. He had enough wealth to escape, to disappear into a private world, but he chose to keep working, to keep meeting people, to keep giving. He believed that if he could not heal himself fully, perhaps he could at least ease the burdens of others. On film sets, his actions continued to surprise everyone. Once, when production delays left the crew unpaid, Keanu used part of his own earnings to cover their wages. Another time, when a stunt performer was injured, Keanu spent hours visiting him in the hospital, bringing books and quiet conversations, reminding him that he was not forgotten. These were not grand gestures for publicity. They were natural, extensions of who he had become. His pain had not hardened him. It had softened him into someone who valued human connection above all else. But storms still followed him. Tabloids and gossip columns tried to create stories around his loneliness, often painting him as a mystery, as if his sorrow was entertainment. Yet Keanu never fought back. He ignored the noise, refusing to let the world turn his grief into a headline. Instead, he continued to live simply, quietly, far from the false glitter of fame. People would often find him reading alone on park benches or sitting on sidewalks, sharing snacks with strangers. To him, life was not about being untouchable. It was about being real. Then, an unexpected moment began to change the way the world saw him. At a press event, when asked what it felt like to live with such sadness, Keanu paused, his eyes heavy yet calm. He answered softly, "Grief never ends, but it changes. You carry it with you, and in some way, it shapes you. But that doesn't mean life cannot be beautiful again." Those words spread across the world, not because of their poetry, but because of their truth. Millions who struggled with loss felt seen, felt understood, through the honesty of a man who had lived it himself. This was the gift Keanu gave to the world, not just through his films, but through his humanity. He reminded people that even in pain, kindness was possible. Even in sorrow, love could be shared, and even in silence, there was strength. But life was not done testing him. Just as Keanu began to embrace his role as a quiet inspiration, a new chapter was waiting, one that would bring both healing and unexpected light into his life. The storms had not ended, but in the shadows, there were also signs of hope beginning to rise. Light in the distance, by the time Keanu Reeves reached the middle years of his career, the world had already painted him as Hollywood's quiet mystery. Fans admired him not only for his films, but also for the way he lived with humility, for the way he carried pain with dignity. Yet deep inside, Keanu still walked with shadows, and though he had learned to survive them, he longed for something more. He longed for peace, for companionship, for a reason to believe that love was not gone forever. For many years, he avoided questions about relationships. Whenever interviewers asked, he would smile politely, shift the conversation, and keep his heart guarded. People assumed he had closed himself off completely, that the man who had once loved so deeply would never allow himself to feel that way again. But life has its own timing, and just when Keanu least expected it, a quiet light appeared in his path. Her name was Alexandra Grant, an artist with a spirit as gentle as his own. Unlike the shallow connections often found in Hollywood, Alexandra offered him understanding, patience, and respect. She was not blinded by his fame. She saw the human behind the name, the man who carried scars but still chose kindness. They had known each other for years as friends, sharing conversations about art, philosophy, and life's deeper meaning. But slowly, friendship began to grow into something warmer, something Keanu had not felt in a long time. Their bond was not rushed, nor was it built on glamour. It was quiet, steady, like a tree taking root after a storm. Alexandra's presence gave Keanu a sense of calm he had long forgotten. She did not try to erase his grief. She simply walked beside it, accepting that his past would always be part of him. And for the first time in decades, Keanu felt the faint glow of hope, the possibility that love could still find him even after loss. When their relationship became known to the public, people responded with surprise, then joy. Millions celebrated him for finding someone who respected his silence and matched his kindness. The image of Keanu holding Alexandra's hand on the red carpet spread across the world, and unlike the usual gossip of Hollywood, this time it felt pure. It felt like a victory for resilience, a reminder that even broken hearts could rediscover light. Yet Keanu himself did not treat it as a spectacle. He remained grounded, never using love as a headline, never chasing attention. He continued to live simply, to ride the subway, to share with strangers, to give quietly. Alexandra was not a trophy. She was a companion, someone who walked with him in both laughter and silence. She gave him balance, and together they showed the world that love could exist without noise, without drama, without pretending. This new chapter did not erase the pain of his past, but it softened it. The memories of Jennifer and their child remained, and Keanu never tried to forget them. Instead, he carried them with him while opening his heart to new beginnings. He showed the world that resilience is not about shutting down feelings, but about learning to love again even when it hurts. For his fans, this was a powerful lesson. Many who had lost loved ones found hope in his story. They saw that grief does not mean life ends, and that kindness can still lead to unexpected light. Keanu had become more than an actor. He had become a mirror for millions, a reminder that even in heartbreak, humanity can still shine. But destiny still had more in store for him. With every new role, with every public moment, Keanu continued to inspire, yet new challenges and deeper questions about life, loss, and purpose waited just around the corner. The weight of kindness. With Alexandra by his side, Keanu Reeves found new balance, but he never allowed comfort to make him distant from the world. Even as his films brought him back into the heart of Hollywood, he carried the same humility that had always defined him. He never forgot the crew members who worked in silence, the fans who looked up to him for hope, or the strangers who crossed his path with quiet struggles. Instead of turning his success into walls, he used it to open doors for others. His generosity became legendary, not because he spoke about it, but because others revealed it. Stories spread of him secretly donating millions to hospitals, funding cancer research in honor of his sister who had battled leukemia, and quietly paying for children's treatments. He never wanted headlines, never asked for recognition. When people tried to praise him, he would gently shake his head and say, "It's the least I can do." For him, kindness was not charity, it was survival, a way to make sense of his own pain by easing the pain of others. Yet this generosity carried a weight. Keanu often wrestled with the feeling that no matter how much he gave, he could not escape, the loneliness that lingered inside him. Some nights, even after giving away so much, he sat alone in silence, wondering if he was doing enough, if his kindness truly mattered in a world filled with cruelty. It was a silent burden, one he carried, without complaint, but one that made his heart heavier than most could imagine. On film sets, his actions continued to reflect his heart. When shooting long and exhausting scenes, he would bring food for the crew, sit with them on the ground, and remind them they were the backbone of the production. He treated the youngest interns with the same respect he gave directors. Many newcomers, In Hollywood, left sets inspired, not just by his talent but by his humility. They saw that greatness was not in being untouchable, but in being kind when you had the power not to be. One powerful example came when a young fan who was battling illness wished to meet him. Instead of sending a signed photo or a quick video, Keanu cleared a day from his schedule to visit the child in person. He sat with him for hours, played games, and listened to his dreams. When the boy's parents later thanked him, tears in their eyes, Keanu simply said, "He gave me more than I gave him." For him, love was not measured in money or fame, but in presence, in showing up when someone needed you most. Still, Keanu's life was not without struggle. Fame continued to surround him, but he never embraced it. He preferred quiet moments over red carpets, genuine conversations over interviews. Sometimes, his refusal to play the Hollywood game confused people, but Keanu understood himself. He knew fame was fragile and only character remained. The world, however, could not ignore his impact. Fans began calling him the internet's boyfriend, not because of his looks, but because of his kindness. Memes, videos, and stories about him spread everywhere. Yet behind the laughter of the internet, there was also real admiration. In a time when arrogance often ruled the spotlight, Keanu reminded people of humility, respect, resilience, and compassion. But deep within, Keanu still felt the weight of everything he had lived through. Even as he gave the world inspiration, he carried scars that would never disappear. He had become a symbol, a quiet hero for millions, but he was still human, still vulnerable, still searching for peace in the spaces between light and shadow. The question that remained was whether life would finally allow him rest, or whether new challenges would rise once again to test the strength he had carried for so long. The quiet hero Keanu Reeves never set out to become a symbol. He never imagined that his life, marked by heartbreak and silence, would inspire millions across the world. He only wanted to live with honesty, to carry his grief with dignity, and to treat others with the kindness he wished had been given to him in his darkest days. But destiny often chooses its own heroes, and for countless people, Keanu became exactly that. A reminder that even in pain, humanity can shine brighter than fame. As the years passed, his career continued to thrive. Yet he remained untouched by the greed of Hollywood. He refused to let wealth control him. While others built mansions and collected luxuries, Keanu lived simply, often giving away much of his fortune. He believed true wealth was not in what you owned, but in what you gave. Those who worked with him said he carried himself the same, way from the first day to the last, humble, respectful, and grateful. In interviews, his words carried more weight than scripts. When asked about fame, he said softly, "I'm just trying to live life, to be kind, to learn." When asked about grief, he admitted, "Loss never leaves you, but it teaches you how precious every moment is." Those words reached beyond Hollywood, beyond screens, and settled into the hearts of people who were struggling, people who needed to hear that even their suffering could lead to resilience. Fans adored him not just for his roles, but for his humanity. They saw him giving his seat to strangers on trains, sharing food with the homeless, laughing warmly with fans, and taking time for every person who approached him. They saw him not as an unreachable star, but as a man who had suffered, endured, and chosen kindness anyway. And in that choice, he became a hero far greater than any character he played. Yet Keanu himself never claimed to be a hero. He insisted he was just human, flawed, and searching like everyone else. But perhaps that was his greatest strength, his refusal to pretend. In a world built on illusions, he stood as reality, as truth. His pain, his humility, and his compassion made people believe in goodness again, toward the later years of his journey. Keanu spoke about life in ways that felt like quiet lessons. He said happiness was not in running after more, but in appreciating the little things: morning sunlight, laughter with friends, the beauty of silence. He reminded the world that resilience was not about hiding pain, but about carrying it with grace. He showed that respect, humility, and kindness were not weaknesses, but the truest forms of strength. And so, Keanu Reeves's story became larger than his films. It became a story about every person who has suffered loss, about every soul who has carried silence, about every heart that has chosen kindness over bitterness. His life taught the world that heartbreak does not have to destroy you. It can shape you into someone gentler, someone stronger, someone who understands the value of humanity. In the end, Keanu Reeves was more than Hollywood's star. He was Hollywood's quiet hero, the man who carried heartbreak and turned it into hope. And though his story was built on pain, it left behind something far greater, an inspiration that would live forever in the hearts of those who believed in kindness.